bet they weren't expecting us to use the fuses like that.
Descendant, powerful reinforcements have arrived.
It's okay if I don't remind you what to do again, yeah?
Stop me if you've heard this one before. A live service looter shooter launches after a suitable, sometimes bordering on excessive amount of hype. Its player counts, at least on Steam, perhaps other platforms as well, range from underwhelming to horrendous. Then it fades away, popping up occasionally with new seasonal content that barely musters any attention, while many are wondering how big-time publishers could expect more. Marvel's Avengers, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and even Skull and Bones to an extent. It feels like we've seen some variation on this rule throughout the years. However, exceptions always exist. Helldivers 2 proved that a live service title still has commercial appeal, with over 12 million copies sold as of May. We now have Nexon's The First Descendant proving that not all looter shooters are doomed to obscurity. Available for Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, the former Project Magnum was first announced in 2021. A name change and some closed beta tests aside, it didn't quite have that level of hype that some other looter shooters, good or bad, have seen. Look no further than Destiny 2: The Final Shape, which was close to beating its all-time concurrent player record on Steam before server issues derailed it. Even then, it received near universal acclaim from critics and fans. It seemed The First Descendant would be doomed, arriving roughly a month after, especially since the marketing cycle began much closer to its release. Nevertheless, it peaked at a whopping 229,257 players on Steam at launch. Beat that on July 4th with 239,494 players and achieved a new lifetime concurrent record of 264,860 on July 7th. This is more than just the benefits of a national holiday or the weekend. In the past 24 hours, it peaked at 215,572 players on Steam at this time. Player numbers will likely drop after the first month, but week to week, they're still going strong, unlike looters with more mainstream IPs, like Marvel's Avengers or Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. If you've seen my review where I criticize the mission design, storytelling, and characters, you would know that The First Descendant does have some flaws. The one redeeming aspect of the whole ordeal, the gameplay, pales in comparison to the top dogs of the genre, whether it's Destiny 2's gunplay and power fantasy, or melee combat and mobility. Sure, the weapon and Descendant customizations are robust, but those are systems lifted directly from other shooters. It would be a travesty if they weren't. Based on those player numbers, you would assume that those on Steam have an overall, more positive take on its brand of looting and shooting. However, The First Descendant has a mixed rating with only 51% positive out of its 40,978 reviews. Nearly down the middle, as mixed can be. The negative reviews criticize monetization, abysmal drop rates, repetitive missions, optimization issues, freezing seems the most common, and more. Yet the positive ones aren't shying away from its flaws either. It's definitely not the worst experience that you can have in a game, but it's not the best. It's just painfully mid across the board, says one review. Another calls it heavily monetized and handled by a greedy publisher with shady practices. One of the more positive reviews feels the grind and microtransactions need to be toned down. The unofficial subreddit is a similar mix of complaints and praise. The complaints are starting to build up more, but there was a fair amount of positivity over the weekend. It still doesn't answer the question, why is The First Descendant so popular? As someone who enjoyed all kinds of loot-based games over the past decade, it's likely a combination of factors. If you're someone who binged Destiny 2 or any other looter shooter in the past month or so, it can feel like a reset, a fresh start. Not too fresh though. It has just the right amount of familiarity with its systems and customizations to ensure that some players aren't lost. As much as I and many others lament its issues, that constant feedback loop of finding better loot, upgrading your character, and discovering new things to craft is very much present. For many players, that's more than enough, especially if you give them enough freedom to customize their builds. It also doesn't hurt that the gunplay can be snappy and the power fantasy is somewhat endearing, whether it's running around as Bunny and electrocuting enemies or dealing death from above as Kyle. You also shouldn't underestimate the appeal of a repetitive gameplay loop, especially when there's so much to grind. The fact that the experience is free to play also effectively removes any barrier of entry, something Suicide Squad and Skull and Bones would have done well to emulate, given their $70 price tags. And no, discounts months after launch aren't the same. Is it just a phase? Will player numbers plummet like every other looter shooter once players have had their fill of the grind? It's hard to predict, but I believe the first Descendant will maintain an audience, whether it's the current numbers or tens of thousands of dedicated players who log in without fail. That's because Nexon understands the other part of a live service title's lifecycle: content. Not only has it shipped the first Descendant with an extensive amount, agree to disagree on the quality, but it's also outlined a fairly packed roadmap that seemingly provides more of what players want. A new Descendant, Colossus, Ultimate Weapon, and Ultimate Descendant are already set to debut in August. Season 1 will kick off later in the same month, each season lasting 3 months and offering a significant content update in each. New Descendant stories, weapons, skins, Ultimate Descendants, dungeons, seasonal progression, and a new Mega Dungeon are en route to keep players grinding away. Of course, while regular new content is good, there are other challenges. What happens if players tire of the current seasonal model? Will Nexon drop any major paid expansions that add much more content at once, or advance the main story, such as it is like Destiny 2? Will we see the same kinds of content, or is there more experimental stuff in the works? How will the publisher's historically annoying greed factor into the monetization? Is the post-launch cycle simply an excuse to cram more microtransactions into the game, Ultimate Descendants notwithstanding? Time will ultimately tell. But producer Byung-Jum Lee outright said in the game's dev launch showcase that it began with the goal of creating a live service game that players will love for a long time. Call it marketing talk, but I believe there's some sincerity in the development team's commitment to long-term support. Maybe others feel the same way and look at the game's extensive content and high-quality visuals as a sign of that dedication. In some ways, you could think of it as an equivalent to how Destiny first started. Were they the most polished and enjoyable experiences? No. Did they have repetitive missions and woeful loot systems? Of course. Did they amass dedicated fan bases who supported them and watched them grow over the years and transform into some truly good to great titles? Yeah, but it took time, support, and a lot of money. No one can guarantee that the first Descendant will follow the same path, but if Nexon can continue to nurture its audience, it could go from an unusual upstart to a proper choice among looter-shooter fans. In the meantime, however, it has a long way to go. Hey, did you know that we at GamingBolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.